Name's Remington Quinn, but most men out here shave the syllables down to rem, the way the wind pares a ridge to its bone. I have driven cattle longer than I have slept under of a proper roof. I know the moods of sky, the scent that rides ahead of weather, the stubbornness of a longhorn's neck. I know the taste of dust when a herd starts to push, and the slower, deeper dust that belongs to a man who has been quiet too long. You live enough seasons on the trail and you learn. There are two clocks keeping time, the one the sun runs and the one that turns inside your chest. The first is honest. The second lies when you need comfort and tells the raw truth when you can barely stand it. That evening, the second clock was loud. I was camped a day's ride south of Willow Springs, holding 3,800 head for a buyer up in Wyoming. The boys were spread wide, Tucker riding drag with a bandana black as creek silt, two new hands playing at poker by lantern, and Cookie stirring beans like the pot had personally insulted him. I kept close to the remuda, hat tipped low, watching a thin slice of moon crawl through cloud. The country there is all gray hills and stringers of cottonwood, the kind of land that carries sound farther than sense. Coyotes spoke. A nighthawk pinned and let go of the dark, and far off, so far I might have called it a memory if the horses hadn't pricked their ears, I heard a woman's breath breaking against her own fear. It wasn't a cry, not yet. It was the sound a bird makes before a hawk shadow finds it. People like to say a trail boss thinks in numbers, pounds of beef, miles to water, hands to hire and fire. I do. But there are figures a man doesn't confess in the ledger. How long since a soft voice spoke near his fire? How many miles a promise can travel before it wears through? You keep those to yourself the way you keep a silver dollar from gamblers. You rub them in your pocket on colder nights. You learn their edges. The shot came next. One hard crack, not far, rolling across the scrub as if the hills had coughed. The horses lifted, danced, settled at my word. I tasted cedar smoke and something bitter. The metal of a door latch rattled too hard. I swung up on Bay Tom and took the north draw without asking anyone along. There's a kind of decision a man shouldn't share. If you're wrong, you take the shame yourself. If you're right, no one needs to say what kind of man you are. The draw narrowed, shouldered in with shale. Down near the creek bed, the moon made little plates of light. Silver where water found its way among stones. I reined up when I saw the house. More a box than a home, set awkward on a knuckle of earth. One window bright, then exploding dark as a girl came through it in a scatter of glass, a shadow with hair loose as water. She hit the ground, stumbled, caught herself and ran. A figure crowded the window frame behind her, big shoulders, a gun barrel pushing past a curtain that looked like a scap cloth. He shouted a name I could not catch. Another shout answered from farther back, a man with a banker's voice, the kind that counts other men's breath. The girl cut for the cottonwoods, knees high, head low. I saw the white of her palm when she pushed a branch aside. I could have turned Bay Tom and ridden on. The herd was a fortune, and the night was not. But my chest clock was pounding now. And there are moments a man spends himself, whether he will or not. I put 2 fingers to my lips and whistled once. Sharp, like calling a dog from a snake. She froze, pivoted, found me there in the saddle where the draw opened like a throat. I kept my voice low. Come here. She looked past me, toward the creek, toward the house, toward every place that was not a man. Then something in my tone must have reached a small, stubborn corner of her, because she came. She was younger up close, barely more than 20, if that. There was blood at one temple where the glass had kissed her, and a scattering of pollen on her sleeve that looked like it didn't belong to her life yet. She had the particular stillness of a person who has learned how to make herself small. When she spoke, her voice bore the faint, high country lilt of a schooling that had not taken. "I need out." "Name?" I said. "Deanna." The window man's shadow moved again. Another lamp flared on in the house. I heard boots and the iron certainty of a door bar lifting. I leaned from the saddle and offered my hand. She put hers there, small but hard with work, and I levered her up behind me. The horn took her white. Bay Tom felt it and tossed, then settled. I turned him into the cottonwoods. Branches gave us their dry fingers. Gravel talked underfoot. We rode down the creek, just enough to muddy our tracks, then took the rock face, where hooves leave less story. We were a quarter-mile gone when the second shot came. It wasn't meant for us, not exactly. More like a notice tacked to the night. The men back there believed the world their pocket, and anything in it a coin to be spent. She clung to the saddle's back edge, not to me, and I was glad of that. There's a difference between rescue and claim, and I have spent enough years among men to know how thin that line wears. When she did touch me, once, it was by accident, her knuckles brushing my coat when Bay Tom took a ditch at a long slant. Her fingers were cold. We gained the ridge, and the world opened its hand. Far south, our campfire burned a small star. I kept Bay Tom to a walk. A running horse draws eyes. The girl breathed in hard measures. Now and again, she turned her head, listening for a chase that did not yet come. The night smelled of ironweed and damp rope, and the kind of quiet that lives after argument. My mind was busy with distances. How long to camp? How to tuck her in the dark where questions have to make an effort to find her? What shape of trouble I had just saddled next to me? "What is it you're running from, Deanna?" "My father," she said, after a moment. "And the banker, he wants me to marry." She said the word father the way some women say winter, not a person. A season you outlast or die of. "What does the banker want?" "Everything that isn't his," she said, and a little anger cut through the fear, which told me more about her than anything else yet had. I nodded. The country is full of men who respect fences only when they are their own. We rode on. The moon slid deeper behind cloud. My shoulder began to ache where old weather lives. She said nothing for a time, and I did not pry. A man can pick a lock with questions and find nothing but more door. Better to sit quiet until the hinge rusts enough to open on its own. "What will you do with me?" she asked at last. "Feed you," I said. "Let you sleep. In daylight we'll sort the rest." "Will you take me back?" "Not unless you ask," I said, "and I'd advise you not to." "You don't know my father." "No," I said, "but I know the kind of men who shout through windows." We slid into camp like another length of darkness. Tucker stood up from the fire, face going from curiosity to caution, to that calm he uses when there is a girl in a place that usually has none. Cookie stopped his stirring. The two new hands looked away, and then did not. I swung down, helped Deanna dismount, and put her beside the wagon wheel where the firelight is a little less sure of itself. "This is Deanna," I said. "She's under my protection tonight." There are statements that end a conversation and begin a story. That was one. Tucker gave his old soldier's nod. Cookie poured coffee and set the tin near Deanna's boots like he was feeding a fawn. The new hands learned the lesson a man should learn early and seldom does. Silence can be kinder than questions. I draped my coat across Deanna's shoulders. She trembled once and mastered it. I felt the shake through the fabric as if it were passing from her bones to mine. "Thank you," she said. I took up a place where I could see her and the night both. There were miles yet between us and whatever followed. But there is a kind of mile a man travels without moving. In that space, I took stock. I have not been a husband. I have not been much of anything except the thing a trail requires. I have slept on ground that forgot me before I rose. I have planned to buy a ranch and held that plan out at arm's length, like a lantern you're not sure is yours to carry. I have believed I could live without the nearness of a voice that meant itself for me. I watched the girl staring into the fire. In the light, her eyes were not frightened so much as alert, as if freedom was a creature that might bolt if she moved too quick. I thought of the house, the shout, the banker's voice, the window spitting her into the night like a seed. I thought of my name, Remington, which comes off the tongue like a gun. A man can spend his life being what he was named or step sideways and be something else. I cleared my throat. The sound was rawer than I meant. "You're safe tonight," I told her. "That's a promise." She nodded once. The promise hung there, simple and heavy, a thing we could warm our hands on. The herd shifted out in the dark, thousands of lives breathing in a single patient body. The wind came off the draw, touching everything with the same indifferent hand, and still, for the first time in a long time, I felt the clock in my chest change its beat. Not faster, not slower, just truer. It is a dangerous feeling for a man who has made a life of keeping his own counsel. Dangerous and hard to resist. "Get some sleep," I said. "Morning will need all of us." She slept. I kept watch, counting the stars I knew by name and the ones I only guessed at, and wondered, quietly, the way a man wonders about weather, how far a promise can travel before it becomes a home. Dawn on the plains is not an arrival so much as a revealing. The world is all silhouette and hush until the first thin color leaks under the horizon, and then you see what the dark had been holding. Cattle standing like islands, the wagon slumped in its shadow, men curled in blankets with their hats pulled low against whatever dreams had not agreed to end. I had slept in fits, boots on, hat brim tipped a fool Tucker into thinking I'd rested. When Cookie rattled the coffee mill, I let my shoulders remember they were mine and went to kick the fire to a proper flame. Deanna woke the way a hunted deer wakes, eyes opening before the rest of her admitted the day had come. She drew the coat tighter, then unfolded herself, careful not to show the stiffness that comes after a night on hard ground. I handed her a tin of coffee and a biscuit splotched with sorghum. She thanked me like a person thanks water. The cut near her temple had crusted, a small brown comet just inside her hairline. She was pale in that clean morning light, but not fragile. Some kinds of strength look exactly like fragility until you get close. I keep a rule with new hands and with strays alike. Work is a mercy when a person needs to stop thinking. I pointed at the kettle, at the bacon, at the stack of tin plates that only get washed when Cookie remembers women exist. She understood the grammar of my pointing and set to without a word. Tucker sauntered up with a look that said he'd already ridden the camp's circumference and found it the same as he left it, which is to say, acceptable. "Quiet night, boss," he said. "Quiet enough." His eyes slid toward Deanna and back to me. "We expecting callers?" "Maybe," I said. "2 men from a house in the north draw. One big and foolish, one smaller and meaner. They're after her." "Law in it?" "Not the kind we recognize," he grunted. Tucker had been cavalry before the world soured him on the taste of orders shouted by men too far from danger. He believes in law, but he doesn't confuse it with men. Cookie, who has a heart he hides under salt, thrust a pan my way. "Get her to eat 2 of these," we said, "and I'll pretend I like you for the better part of a morning." The herd needed moving. A hot day will stir flies, flies stir cattle, and then all your plans are a hill of hoof prints. We broke camp with the efficiency that passes for tenderness among men who've shared weather. I put Deanna with the wagon where the going was slower and the dust thinner. She tried to refuse my coat. I made her keep it. The sun would warm the cuts, but there is a kind of chill that only leaves a person when they forget to notice it, and that can take a while. By mid-morning, the country spread wide and open, a gray-brown ocean with islands of sage and the dark threads of arroyos sewn through it. A hawk rode a seam of air above us, as if pulled there by a string only God could see. The herd rolled forward with its patient thunder. The new hands, Cal and Bertie, both too young to trust and too proud to admit it, rode flank and tried not to look toward the wagon where a woman's presence turned the day into something they didn't have a name for. I rode back to check on Deanna when the trail bent into a shallow coulee. She had braided her hair with a length of rawhide and pinned the braid under my hat to keep the sun off the cut. It looked wrong on her for a moment, a borrowed shape, and then right in a way I could not explain. "How far do you aim to take this herd?" she asked. "Wyoming line, then west to a buyer near the river. Price is good, men are decent, water's honest." I try to smile. Cattle don't argue when you treat them fairer than men do. She nodded and looked out at the backs of the longhorns, their ribs moving like bellows, their horns writing slow alphabets against the sky. "What happens to a girl who appears at your fire and asks for a new life, Rem?" "She works," I said. "She eats. She sleeps under watch. After that we see. And if men come to claim her, men with money and the kind of voice that makes sheriffs lean the wrong way." "Men can claim a lot of things," I said, "but a person is not a bridle. A sheriff who leans the wrong way will find I push back." She studied my face a moment, perhaps looking for bravado. There wasn't any. I don't play a hero. I have seen what happens to men who mistake drama for duty. Duty is quieter. It puts you where you said you would be and lets you count your ribs after. The first sign we were being followed was not a sight, but a feeling, the kind that runs like a mouse along the baseboards of your thinking. Birds lifted from a cottonwood we had not stirred. A puff of dust rose on the eastern edge of the world and hung too long in air. In that country, men are weather if you watch close. I told Tucker to swing wide on a scouting circle. He cut away without question. 20 minutes later he came back slow, which told me enough before he said anything. "2 riders, coming easy, trying not to look like they're trying. Guns? On their horses, yes. In their hands? Not yet. Bankers don't draw first. Not where folks can see." I looked to the wagon. Deanna was washing plates with a corner of sacking and a basin of creek water Cookie had climbed down to fetch. She looked peaceful in the way a person looks when they have decided not to borrow trouble from the next hour. It put a pressure in my throat I didn't like. We took the herd into a shallow bowl where the wind would carry our smell a different direction. The riders ghosted toward us, careful, like men approaching a skittish mule. When they were near enough to talk without shouting, the banker touched the brim of his fancy hat. He wore a suit the color of well-fed crows, and a tie pinned with something that might buy a horse. The big man at his shoulder had shoulders like furniture and eyes that never learned to focus on anything he wasn't about to break. "Morning," the banker said. His mouth smiled. His eyes didn't. "I'm Harrison Miller of the Miller and Wyeth concern. I'm told you are Mr. Quinn." "I've been called that," I said. "We are in a small bind," he said. "A family matter. A misunderstanding, perhaps. A young woman has gone astray from her father's house. We aim to return her. I believe she's found your company." Cookie made a low noise behind me that said he had an opinion about misunderstandings. I kept my hands easy on the horn. "If the woman wants to go," I said, "she can say so." The banker's smile sharpened. "She's not in a position to want, Mr. Quinn. She's in a position to obey." The big man shifted in his saddle, trying to grow larger than he already was. "Just hand her over, Cowboy. There's money waiting," he said. "Tucker," I said, without moving my eyes from the banker, "walk the herd." He did, giving the cattle the kind of energy that says we are not staying long. I let the silence thicken a moment. A crow landed on a fence post that had no business being there and laughed its harsh little laugh. "Mr. Miller," I said, "my wagon is not a jail, and my fire is not a courtroom. A person who eats under my sky decides their steps with their own feet. If she wants you, she will go to you. If she wants me, she will remain." "You speak boldly for a man with so much to lose," he said, glancing at the sea of beef behind us. "I speak plainly," I said. "Bold men are usually loud." Something passed through his eyes then. Annoyance chained to calculation. He pushed his horse forward 2 steps. "Deanna," he called to Nunum, "come along. Your father is waiting." She stood, set the basin down, and wiped her hands on her skirt. It would have taken only one small, broken expression for me to reach for my gun, but she did not give me that. She walked to where we 3 could see her, no closer to him than to me, and lifted her chin just enough to look like herself. "No," she said. The big man snorted. "Girl, do not make." "Mr. Miller," she said, more to him than to me, "you cannot buy what I don't sell." He tapped his horse's neck, like he was reminding the animal and himself that he owned living things. "Your father agrees to the contract. I have expectation, expenses, a reputation." "You'll live," she said, "or you won't. That part's not my job. There are lines that sound like someone else wrote them for your mouth. This one belonged to her. I had the wild urge to laugh, and the steadier urge to make sure laughter would be allowed tomorrow and the day after. "Sir," the banker said to me, gathering the remains of his smile, "I will give you $50 for the trouble and a voucher at my bank besides." "You said the word trouble like you think it is mine." I said, "It isn't. But here's mine for you. If you or any man rides into my herd or puts a hand to my wagon without invitation, you'll find me inconvenient in ways your voucher won't fix." The big man's hand twitched near his holster, because that's what big men do when talk feels like a kind of defeat. The banker's eyes flickered. He had not expected the day to demand a different kind of arithmetic. He turned his horse with too much rein, then corrected, then composed himself. "This is not finished, he said. "There are laws." "There are," I said. Nah, let's hope we both meet the same one." They rode off the way men ride who wish they had come another day. I watched them until the land took them back. Tucker breathed out something I might have mistook for a hymn if I didn't know him. Cookie spat into the dust. I liked him better when he was farther away. Deanna stood there a long moment, as if testing whether her legs would hold the weight of a choice. Then she came to where I sat and looked up at me like a person checking the sky for rain. "Thank you," she said. "Eat," I said, because it is easier to say that than the thing my chest had been practicing. "Then ride on the wagon a while. Wind can wash fear if you let it." She nodded, obeyed, and when she turned away, I let myself breathe again. We moved north through the afternoon, light turning thick and the smell of the herd rising like something cooked low and long. The hawk was gone. In its place, the slow, brown certainty of evening. I rode ahead a mile and let my horse drink at a trickle where water stitched two stones together. On my way back, I decided what men decide when they have already decided and are just now giving themselves permission to say it in daylight. A girl under my protection is a promise. A wife is a fact. There's a difference, and it is the kind that keeps the wrong men away. That night, the wind came down off the hills, slow and steady, like it had been watching us all day, and only now decided to speak. We made camp near a dry wash that still smelled faintly of spring water. Tucker and the boys hobbled the horses. Cookie set the beans on, and I took the time to oil my Winchester. A man's got to keep his tools clean when the world's been throwing dust in his face. Deanna sat apart at first, near the fire but not of it, eyes tracing the flames as if they might spell out a future she could read. I knew that look. I'd seen it on men who'd come home from war and on mothers who'd buried their sons under stones too small to mark the loss. It's the look of someone trying to decide whether they still belong among the living. I went over with 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for her, and took a seat on the other side of the fire. "You eat yet?" She nodded. "Cookie made me. He said I looked like a tumbleweed with a heartbeat." That's Cookie's way of saying he's glad you're alive. She gave a quiet smile, the first I'd seen on her face since the night before. "You all are different," she said, "men who don't talk more than they have to. That's because words out here cost more than they're worth." I took a sip, let the bitterness fill the space between us. "You figure what you'll do now?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I can't go back, but I don't know what else there is." The fire snapped, threw sparks into the sky. I watched one fade before I answered. "How about you could ride with us till Wyoming? Work for your keep. I'll see you safe to the next town." Her eyes met mine across the flame. "And after that? After that's up to you." We sat like that a while, 2 strangers trying to make sense of the same silence. The night around us was wide and kind, the way only the frontier can be when it forgets to be cruel. Coyotes sang out somewhere to the east, and the herd murmured like a river made of breathing. "Rem," she said at last, soft but sure, "why did you help me?" I looked down at my hands, scarred, brown, more rope than skin. 'Cause someone once helped me," I said, "and I didn't ask why neither." She waited, like the wind itself was holding its breath. "Years back," I said, "I rode with a man named Asa Kearney. He was older, quiet, didn't drink, didn't gamble. We worked a trail up from Texas. One night, rustlers hit us hard. Asa took a bullet meant for me. He died before sunrise, but not before saying, 'Don't let the bad ones teach you how to be.'" I took another drink of coffee that had gone cold. I've been trying to remember that ever since. Deanna watched the fire. Did he have a family? No, just the trail, same as me. I reckon we're all kin out here if we stay long enough. She nodded, and there was a stillness between us that wasn't empty. It was full of the kind of understanding that don't need explaining. When the others bedded down, I walked the perimeter. The stars had come out thick as spilled salt, and the moon was a thin blade cutting through cloud. I could hear the soft rhythm of cattle shifting in their sleep. Every sound meant something out there. Boot scuffing meant a hand moving. A low murmur meant a dream. When you've spent enough nights guarding what can't guard itself, you start to hear the world like it's speaking a language only you were meant to know. By the time I got back, Deanna was asleep, wrapped in my old coat, her face turned toward the firelight. There's a peace to watching someone rest when the world's been chasing them. It reminded me how long it had been since I'd seen peace anywhere. Tucker stirred by the coals and muttered, "You planning to marry that girl, Rem?" I didn't answer right away. "Ain't that quick to talk of marriage?" He pulled the blanket higher. "Still a girl under your wing brings talk. Men like Miller, they'll keep coming. Might be the only way to keep her name clean and your camp quieter." I thought about that. In the West, marriage isn't just about love. Sometimes it's about survival. A ring can be a roof when the law's thin and the world's mean. The next morning, we rode out before the sun had fully climbed. The air was thin and sharp. Deanna sat on the wagon seat beside Cookie, helping him count crates and lash down pots. I caught her laughing once at something he said, a small sound, fragile and real. It surprised me how much I liked hearing it. Around noon, we stopped by a trading post, a crooked little shack with a porch that leaned like it had been drinking. The sign read, "Sam Carter's Goods and Sundries," though the paint had lost its courage years ago. Inside, the smell of tobacco, flour, and iron nails hung heavy. Sam was there behind the counter, a thin man with a beard like frost and eyes that missed nothing. "Morning, Rem," he said. "Our trail looks good on you." "Morning, Sam." I took off my hat. "We need grain, coffee, maybe a new wheel bolt if you got one." He nodded, started pulling items off shelves. Then his eyes flicked to Deanna, who was standing near the door, looking smaller than she was. "New hand?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "She's riding with us a while." Sam gave a slow nod, but said nothing more. In towns like this, people learn not to ask questions that might live longer than they do. As we packed up the supplies, Sam leaned close and lowered his voice. "2 riders came through yesterday, banker type and a bruiser, asking after a girl." "I figured so," I said. "Wanted me to tell him if I saw her." "You tell him?" "I told him nothing worth hearing," he said, then looked toward Deanna again. "She's got the look of a girl trying to remember what free feels like. You keep her that way if you can." I paid him what was due and a little more. "Appreciate it." He waved us off, then called after me as we mounted up. "Rem, be careful with her. Some ghosts outlive the men who make 'em." We rode north again. The air changed after the trading post. Colder, cleaner, with a hint of rain that hadn't decided whether to fall. Deanna sat quiet, the rim of her hat low, the shadow of thought pulling her somewhere I couldn't follow. As evening crept in, she spoke. "Rem, do you think folks can start over, truly?" I thought about it, about Asa, about the men who never found their peace. "Maybe," I said, "but not by running from what hurt 'em, only by walking far enough that the hurt can't keep up." She looked at me, that fire in her eyes again. "Then maybe I'll learn to walk." I smiled. "Small. You already have." We rode on, the world turning copper with the sunset. Behind us, the land swallowed our tracks like it had forgiven them. Ahead, the hills were waiting, quiet, patient, and wide enough to hold a promise neither of us had spoken yet. That night, as the fire burned low and the men drifted to sleep, I caught myself staring at her again. She was looking at the flames, same as always, but now there was something different in her face. Less fear, more life. It hit me then. This girl who'd come to me out of gunfire and glass wasn't a burden or a rescue anymore. She was a reminder of something I'd nearly forgotten. That even out here, where the wind erases everything, some souls still find a way to stay. And for the first time in longer than I could measure, I felt the edges of the trail blur into something like belonging. The night held its breath, and I let it. The next few days turned slow and clean. The land stretched wider, quieter, the way it does when autumn starts sneaking up on summer. Every morning I'd ride out before the others, checking the trail ahead, counting water holes, reading the wind. Every evening we'd circle the herd and camp near whatever passed for shelter. A rise, a stand of willow, a trickle of stream. Deanna began to fit into the rhythm of the drive, like a song you didn't know you knew the tune of. She'd help Cookie in the mornings, pour coffee for the men, keep the camp clean. When the wagon creaked forward, she'd ride up front beside me sometimes, asking questions that came out of quiet, the kind you don't ask unless you're trying to build a life again. "Rem," she said one afternoon as we crossed a shallow ford, "what made you stay on the trail all these years?" "Habit," I said, "and the fact that the trail doesn't ask questions." She smiled faintly. "You don't seem like a man running from something." "Maybe I'm not running," I said. "Maybe I just never learned to stop." We climbed a ridge where the world opened up like a secret. From there, you could see miles of nothing that meant everything. Waves of grass, low clouds bruising the sky, a hawk cutting figure eights in the wind. The cattle below moved like slow thunder, their dust hanging in gold light. Deanna watched a long time. "It's beautiful," she said. "It is," I agreed. "But beauty out here don't mean safe. Sometimes the prettiest land is where men vanish easiest." She turned toward me. "Do you ever get lonely?" "Always," I said. "But it's a kind of loneliness that don't bite. It just sits beside you, like an old friend who's run out of stories." She nodded, thoughtful. "My father used to say, a woman alone is a broken thing." "Then your father don't know women," I said, "and he sure don't know what broken really looks like." That made her laugh, quiet but real. It carried across the wind like the smallest mercy. We made camp that night near an old cottonwood split by lightning. The men worked the herd into a tight circle and settled in. I was sitting by the fire, sharpening my knife, when Deanna came over, Her hands were clean, but her sleeves still smelled of biscuit flour. "Tucker told me you saved a whole drive once," she said. "Stampede near the Platte River." "Tucker talks too much," I said, not looking up. "He said you rode straight into the herd." "Some fool had to." She sat down across from me. "Why?" "Because if you don't turn the lead steer, the rest follow straight into the water, and once they start running, there's no stopping them. Fear's like that. You either face it head on, or it'll drown you." She was quiet a long while. The firelight painted her face in slow, warm gold. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" she asked. "Running into the water?" I sheathed the knife. "No," I said. "I think you already turned the herd." She looked at me, the kind of look that don't last long, but stays with you forever. "You always talk like that?" "Only when I forget not to," I said. Later, when the camp went still, I walked out past the circle of light. The stars were sharp, too many for counting. I thought about what Tucker said days ago, about marriage, about protection. He wasn't wrong. In these parts, a woman traveling alone might as well have a target painted on her back. But it wasn't just protection gnawing at me. It was something older, quieter, the feeling that my life had been a long road, headed nowhere, and now suddenly there was someone walking beside me who made the miles mean something. I stood there until the night grew cold enough to bite. When I came back, Deanna was sitting up, watching the fire. She looked small in my coat, hair falling loose around her shoulders. "You should sleep," I said. "I can't," she answered. "The dark feels heavier tonight." I sat across from her. The silence stretched thin, like a wire waiting to snap. "Rem," she said, "if I asked you to take me as your wife, not for love, but for safety, why would you?" Her words fell soft, but they hit hard. "Why ask me?" I said. "Because you're the only man I've met who doesn't look at me like property." I watched the fire dance in her eyes. "You know what that means, don't you? A paper marriage is still a chain, no matter how kind the man who holds it." "I know," she said, "but it'd be my choice this time." I didn't answer right away. Out here, promises aren't words, they're weights, and this one felt like it would tip the balance of both our lives. At last I said, "If that's what you need, I'll stand beside you. But you don't owe me a thing, Deanna. Not your name, not your thanks, not your heart." She smiled a little, sad and sure. "Maybe that's why I trust you." We rode into Willow Springs the next afternoon. It was a dust-bitten town with one church, 2 saloons, and a main street that looked like it had seen more funerals than weddings. Tucker scouted ahead to water the horses, while I went with Deanna to the small office of the sheriff. Donovan was his name, a solid man with kind eyes and the look of someone who'd rather mend fences than raise guns. I'd known him from trail seasons past. "Well, Rem," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you finally bringing trouble into town instead of out of it." "Oh, I guess so," I said. "Yeah, need a favor, Sheriff." He looked at Deanna, then back at me. "What kind?" "A marriage license," I said. His brows lifted, but he didn't smile. "That's a rare kind of protection these days." "That's the idea." He nodded slowly, pulled a form from his desk, and began filling it out. "Bride's name?" "Deanna Calloway." "Groom?" "Remington Quinn." When it was done, he signed his name at the bottom. "You two got witnesses?" "Tucker and Cookie," I said. "They'll stand for it." Deanna said nothing. Her hands were clasped in front of her, steady but pale. Donovan handed me the paper. May not be love, Rem, but I've seen worse reasons to marry. I tipped my hat. Appreciate it, Sheriff? Outside, the sky was wide and clean again, as if it wanted no part of human affairs. I looked at Deanna. You sure about this? She met my eyes. I'm sure. That evening, under the dry wind and the fading sun, Tucker read the vows from a Bible missing half its pages. Cookie stood there with his hat off, trying not to smile. The air smelled of dust and lilac soap from Deanna's hair. When Tucker finished, she slipped a small silver band from her pocket, one I hadn't known she carried, and placed it in my hand. It was my mother's. She said, now it seems right that it keeps meaning something. I slid it onto her finger. My voice didn't come easy when I spoke the words that made her my wife, even if just on paper. The wind caught her veil of hair and lifted it across her face. She looked at me through it, soft, clear, unafraid. And for one strange heartbeat, the world went quiet. The herd, the town, the wind itself, as if everything living had paused to see what we'd just done. Then Tucker cleared his throat. Well, boss, he said, guess that makes it official. Guess it does, I said, but deep down, I knew better. Some things don't become official because of ink or words. They become real when the heart decides they already are. And somewhere in that dusty, dying light, mine just did. The days after the wedding blurred into motion, the way miles do when you stop measuring them. We left Willow Springs before dawn, the town still half asleep, its windows holding the last of yesterday's dreams. Deanna rode beside me on Bay Tom, her small hands steady on the saddle horn. No veil, no white dress, just the same woman who had walked through glass and gunfire, now carrying my name like a quiet shield. Cookie called her Mrs. Quinn that morning. He did it half in jest, half in respect, but she answered with a nod that made the boys mind their manners. There was no laughter after that, just the soft rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather, and the sound of her breathing behind me. When the sun rose, the land came alive in shades of gold and ash. The air was thin, sharp, and clean, the kind that makes you believe, for a heartbeat, that the world might forgive you. I'd spent my life chasing that feeling. Never found it till then. We reached open country by noon. The herd fanned out slow, taking the land like an old hymn, steady, patient, meant to be sung without rush. I rode ahead to scout the next waterhole, then circled back toward the wagon. Deanna was there, sleeves rolled, wiping flour from her hands. Cookie had her kneading dough, teaching her how to judge the weight of a biscuit by touch. She caught me watching and smiled, small and fleeting, but enough to make the whole damn trail feel lighter. That evening, while the sun sank red behind the hills, Tucker came over with his coffee tin and a grin he didn't bother to hide. Never thought I'd see the day, he said. What day's that? I asked. You, wearing a ring you didn't win in a poker game. I looked down at my hand. The simple band of iron felt strange on my finger, heavier than gold. It's a piece of paper, Tucker, nothing more. He chuckled. If you say so, boss, just don't tell her that. Women got a way of turning paper into forever. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need help finding their way. That night, Deanna and I shared the wagon for the first time. The others made a point of camping a little farther off, giving us space. The boards creaked under the weight of the day. I lay on one side. she on the other, the air between us thick with things neither of us knew how to name. She broke the silence first. Does it feel strange? What's that? Being married again. I've never been married before, I said, just to the trail. Then maybe we're both new at it. We fell quiet again. Outside, the wind moved through the grass, soft and low, like the voice of something too old to be seen. I could hear the cattle shifting, 1,000 bodies breathing in slow, living rhythm. Somewhere, a coyote called, a lonely sound that seemed to know exactly where it came from. After a while, she said, "Rem, if you'd rather this be just words on paper, I'd understand." "It's already words on paper," I said. "But what we do with those words, that's up to us." She turned toward me then, eyes glinting faintly in the firelight that seeped through the canvas. "You talk like a preacher sometimes. Only when I've got no better answers." She smiled. "Then I'll take the ones you've got." Sleep came slow that night. I lay awake listening to the night breathe, to her breathing, to the sound of the wind brushing the canvas like fingertips. Somewhere in the dark, something in me shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just a small giving way, the way snow melts even when the mountain means to keep it. By morning, I wasn't sure where the line was anymore, between what we'd done for safety and what might be becoming something else. The trail carried us north into harder country. Hills turned rougher, water scarcer, and the herd restless. We lost a steer to a washout, another to a broken leg. The men grew quiet with the work. Out here talk wears thin fast. Deanna didn't complain. She rode through dust, sun, and storm like she'd been born to it. When Cookie took ill one afternoon, she stepped in without being asked, boiled coffee, cleaned pans, tended the sick. By the time we camped that night, the men had stopped seeing her as a stranger. She'd become part of the outfit, not because she belonged, but because she refused to be left out. That night, I found her sitting alone near the fire, brushing out her hair. It caught the light like copper wire. I sat down beside her, not too close, and handed her a cup. "Hard day," I said. "They're all hard," she answered, not bitter, just stating a fact. "But it feels good, doing something that matters." "It does." She looked at me then, studying my face the way a person studies a map they've already decided to follow. "You ever think about stopping, Rem, getting off the trail?" "Sometimes," I said, "usually when it's raining sideways." She smiled, but her eyes stayed serious. "And after the rain?" "After the rain, there's always another trail." She shook her head. "That sounds lonely." "It is, but it's the only life I know." For a while, we just listened to the wind. Then she said, almost a whisper, "Maybe it doesn't have to be." I didn't answer, didn't trust myself to. The days kept coming, and the land kept changing. By the time we reached the foothills, the world smelled different. Pine instead of sage, rain instead of dust. Nights grew colder, the stars sharper. We were close to the end of the drive, close to turning the herd over and getting paid. Close to something else, too, though I didn't yet have a name for it. One evening, as we watered the herd near a creek, I saw Deanna standing by the edge, watching her reflection tremble in the water. The light touched her hair, her face, her hands, everything the past had tried to take. She looked up when she heard me. "Rem," she said softly, "do you think this will last?" "The drive?" "No. This, whatever this is." I thought about the road behind us, the dust, the danger, the way she'd held herself steady through it all. Out here nothing lasts, I said, not the storms, not the calm. All we can do is ride it while it's ours. She nodded, like she understood too well. Then I'll ride it, she said, for as long as you'll let me. I wanted to tell her that I'd let her forever, but forever is a dangerous word for a man like me, one who's buried too many promises in the dirt. So I just said, you will. And that night, when she lay beside me again, closer this time, I stopped trying to remember where one life ended and the other began. The wind moved through the canvas, the fire outside burned low, and somewhere beyond all that sound, I swear I could hear the faint rhythm of two hearts learning the same beat. The trail, for once, felt less like something I was traveling, and more like something that might finally be carrying me home. By the time we reached the Red Butte crossing, the air had turned sharp enough to bite. Frost rimmed the grass each dawn, and the cattle's breath rose like ghosts over the plain. We'd been on the trail near a month since Willow Springs, and though the herd had thinned by a few heads, the men were holding up. The same couldn't be said for me. Something in my chest had begun to change. Slow, quiet, like the earth warming under snow. I told myself it was the weather, or maybe the miles, but deep down, I knew better. Deanna had found her rhythm on the trail. She moved through camp with that quiet surety I'd come to recognize in women who've had to make peace with hardship. The men treated her with the kind of respect you can't order, only earn. Tucker, who'd seen more than his share of rough years, had even started teaching her how to handle a Winchester. She took to it with a calm that unsettled me, not because she looked dangerous, but because she looked like someone who'd stopped being afraid of anything. One night, we camped near a rise where the wind hummed through the grass like a low hymn. The stars were so clear, they looked close enough to touch. I sat by the fire, oiling my saddle. Deanna came over with a blanket around her shoulders, the firelight turning her eyes the color of old honey. "Rem," she said, voice low, "I've been thinking." "That always means trouble," I said, half smiling. "Maybe," she said, "man, but I've been thinking that when we reach Wyoming, you could start that ranch you always talk about. You could stop riding from one job to the next." I worked the rag along the leather, slow and steady. "You been talking to Tucker?" She shook her head. "No, I've just been watching you. You don't belong to the road anymore, Rem. You've been looking past it, like a man who sees home and doesn't know it yet." Her words sat heavy in the night air. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that a man like me wasn't made for fences or futures. But the truth was, I'd already started seeing it. A stretch of land, a barn, a river close enough to hear in the dark, and her voice, soft, calling from a porch light at dusk. I didn't say any of that. Some visions lose their magic once you name them. "Maybe," I said at last, "but ranches don't grow on wishes." "Neither do people," she said, "but we try anyway." The way she said it, quiet, steady, left no room for argument. A few days later, Tucker rode up at dusk, his face tight. "We got company," he said. "2 riders on the ridge. Been tailing us since noon. Don't look like cowhands." I didn't need to ask who. Men like Harrison Miller don't forgive being told no, especially by the kind of woman they thought they owned. We circled the herd in tighter. Tucker and I took watch that night, rifles close. The stars burned white overhead. For hours, the night held its breath. Then sometime past midnight, we heard it, a distant hoofbeat, slow but deliberate, echoing down the slope. I motioned to Tucker and slipped into the dark, every sense awake. The riders didn't bother hiding. They came down the ridge easy, like men certain the law belonged to them. When they reached the campfire's edge, I could see their faces. Miller looked the same. Slick hair, polished boots, that smile that never meant what it showed. The brute beside him, her father, looked worse for wear, red-eyed, unshaven, anger clinging to him like sweat. "Evening, Quinn," Miller called out, voice smooth as oil. "We've come for what's ours." I stepped forward, rifle in hand but down at my side. "Nothing here belongs to you." The older man spat into the dirt. "That girl's my blood," he growled. "She's coming home." I heard Deanna's footsteps behind me before I turned. She come out from the wagon, hair loose, face pale but steady. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. "You made home a prison, and I walked out." Her father took a step toward her, and I raised the rifle. "That's close enough." He froze, his breath coming out hard and ragged. "You think you can keep her from me, boy? You think a piece of paper makes you a man?" "No," I said, "but it makes her my wife, and that's enough." Miller laughed softly. "This can go easy, Quinn. Hand her over, and we'll forget the rest. I'll even throw in some compensation for your inconvenience." "You talk about her like she's cattle," I said, "but you'll find I brand my own, and not with money." His smile thinned. "You'd risk your life for a girl you barely know?" I stepped closer. "You don't get to measure knowing. Some things you just feel in your bones, and I know she's not going with you." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Miller's hand twitched toward his gun. I didn't think. The sound cracked the night. One shot sharp, final. His gun never cleared the holster. The bullet hit the dirt by his boot, close enough to tear leather. He froze, eyes wide. "You'd shoot me?" "I just did," I said, voice low. "Next time, I won't miss." Tucker appeared beside me then, rifle raised. Cookie and the new hand stepped from the shadows, every one of them armed. The odds had turned. Miller cursed under his breath, glared at Deanna, then at me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Men like you always do." "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." They backed off slow, climbed into the dark, their horses clattering over rock. The night swallowed them whole. When the sound of hooves faded, I turned to Deanna. She was shaken, not from fear, but from something older, release maybe, or the sudden weight of being free. I reached out, careful, and she stepped into me like a leaf finding water. "I thought they'd never stop coming," she whispered. "They're done," I said, "at least for now." She looked up at me, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. "Why, Rem, why do this for me? I could have said a dozen things, because it was right, because no one else would, because the world's cruel enough without me adding to it. But the truth came simple. Because you make me remember what peace feels like," I said. The fire snapped between us. She closed her eyes, leaned her forehead against my chest, and I felt her breath steady against my shirt. Later that night, after the men turned in, I sat awake, watching the coals die down. The stars had dulled, clouds rolling in from the west. Change was coming. I could smell it in the wind. I looked at her sleeping beside the wagon, her hand curled near her face. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about where the next job would come from or what the next mile would cost. I was thinking about staying. And that thought, that wild, uninvited thought, felt more dangerous than any gun pointed my way. Because for a man who spent his whole life on the move, the hardest thing isn't riding into danger. It's finding something worth stopping for. The storm hit 2 days later, rolling over the plains like a memory you can't outrun. The sky went from clear to bruised in the space of an hour. By noon, the wind was howling, snapping through the herd, turning dust into walls that could blind a man in his own tracks. We pushed the cattle toward a line of bluffs for shelter, shouting against the noise. Every command vanished into the wind before it reached another ear. Tucker rode up alongside me, his face streaked with grit. "We'll lose half the herd if we don't get them pinned." "Then we lose them," I said, squinting against the storm. "I'd rather lose cattle than men." He nodded once, trusting me even when the choice hurt. That's the kind of faith you earn on 100 hard miles, not a Sunday sermon. Deanna was with Cookie in the wagon, both of them huddled under tarps as the sky tore open. The rain came down like it was trying to scrub the earth clean. I fought my way over, the wind cutting through my coat, and pulled back the flap. She looked up, eyes wide, hair plastered to her face. "Oh, stay down," I shouted. "Keep the horses calm." She nodded, gripping the seat rail with both hands. I could see the fear in her eyes, but it wasn't the kind that froze you. It was the kind that made you remember you were alive. The next hour blurred into thunder and water and movement. The cattle bawled, the ground turned to mud, and the world shrank to the space between one breath and the next. By the time the storm broke, the herd was scattered, but the men were safe. That was enough. When the rain eased into drizzle, I found Deanna standing outside the wagon, soaked through, watching the clouds tear themselves apart. Her dress clung to her like memory, and her face was turned toward the horizon. I walked up beside her, my boots sinking deep in the mud. "You all right?" I asked. She nodded. "I've seen storms before, but not like that." "No one's seen this one before," I said. "That's the thing about weather. It never repeats itself. Not exactly." She smiled faintly, teeth chattering. "You always find a way to make everything sound like it means something." "Maybe everything does." I took off my coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth hit her slow, sinking in. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain had turned soft, falling in thin lines that caught what little light was left. "You know," she said quietly, "my father used to say a man's worth was measured by what he owned. Cattle, land, people. He thought owning meant living. And what do you think?" "I think he was wrong," she said. "I think a man's worth is measured by what he'd give up to protect something that can't be owned." Her words landed deep, maybe because they sounded like something I'd been trying to say my whole life, but never had the right voice for. We stayed like that until the rain stopped. The air smelled new, wet earth, pine, and smoke from our fire struggling back to life. Tucker and the boys worked to round up the herd again. The land steamed under the returning sun, and the world looked cleaner, but not kinder. That night, we made camp in a hollow between two ridges. The sky cleared, leaving the stars sharp enough to hurt your eyes. I sat by the fire, running a hand over the map spread across my knee. Wyoming wasn't far now. Maybe 3 days' ride if the herd held steady. After that, who knew? Deanna came to sit beside me. She washed her hair, and it smelled faintly of rain and cedar. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That the trail's almost over, I said. "Does that make you glad or sorry?" I folded the map, staring into the fire. Both. A man like me don't always know what to do when the road ends. "Then maybe you find another kind of road," she said. I looked at her. "And what kind's that?" "The kind you walk, not ride." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. For a moment, the night felt smaller, tighter, like it belonged just to us. "Deanna," I said quietly, "when we get to Wyoming, you'll have choices. You can stay with me a while, or you can go your own way. You don't owe me anything for what's past." She met my gaze, steady and unflinching. "You still don't understand, do you?" "Understand what?" "That I'm not here because I owe you," she said. "I'm here because I choose to be." The fire cracked between us, sending a small wave of sparks into the dark. I wanted to tell her what that meant to me, what it stirred up inside. But words like that feel too big for the night. They hang in the air, waiting to be broken by morning. So instead, I just nodded. We sat there a long while, listening to the herd settle, to the slow hush of wind running through the grass. The stars hung low, close enough to make a man believe he could reach up and steal one for himself. Then she said, almost to herself, "You ever wonder why people like us find each other out here?" "Because the rest of the world stopped looking," I said. She smiled at that. A small, sad thing. Maybe. Or maybe the West keeps what the world throws away and makes something out of it. I didn't answer, but I looked at her and thought that maybe she was right. The West didn't make saints or sinners. It just took what was left of you and gave you a chance to become something else. Later, when the camp fell quiet, she turned in, but I stayed by the dying fire. I thought of Asa, of the years I'd spent chasing trails with no destination, of all the people I'd left behind to keep moving. And now, for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't want to keep moving. I wanted to stop riding, stop running, stop pretending that freedom was the same as being alone. The sky above me was clean and endless, and the stars didn't look so far away anymore. Maybe I thought a man can start over even after the world's decided he's finished. And maybe, just maybe, I already had. We reached Wyoming under a pale morning sky, the kind that looked half forgotten by the sun. Frost clung to the low brush, and the earth gave off steam where the first light touched it. The air tasted different there, cleaner, sharper, like the beginning of something instead of the end. The herd moved slow, their hooves thudding in a rhythm that felt almost human. The buyer met us near a wide river, flanked by 2 barns and a corral that had seen better days. His name was Hale, thin man, gray beard, eyes that measured everything before deciding its worth. He counted cattle the way a priest counts sins, slow and exact. When he was done, he nodded once. "Good herd," he said. "I'll wire the money south." That was that. Weeks of trail dust and long nights turned into numbers on a piece of paper. I've been through it before, but this time it felt different. There was no restlessness, no urge to ride out again. Just a hollow space where something else was waiting to be built. After the exchange, the men started talking about their next jobs, some heading east, some north. Tucker came up to me while I was rolling my bedroll. "So," he said, "what's next for Rem Quinn?" "Don't know," I said, tying the rope slow. "Maybe I'll stay a spell." He grinned. "Stay?" Hell, that's a first. First time for everything. He leaned against his saddle horn, eyes crinkling. You think the lady'll want the same? I looked over. Deanna was standing by the river, coat drawn tight, watching the water move. The light caught her hair, turning it to gold fire in the cold. I think she already does, I said. We camped one last night before parting ways. The men laughed softer than usual, their voices carrying that tired peace that comes at the end of a long road. Cookie made beans that didn't taste of dust for once, and Tucker played a tune on his harmonica that wasn't sad, just lonesome. Deanna sat beside me, quiet but close. You'll miss them, she said. I'll miss the way they made the miles feel shorter, I said. She smiled. Maybe we'll make our own miles now. The fire burned low, the night pulling tight around us. I thought about what she said, about the miles ahead that didn't need cattle or corn to mean something. When morning came, the men rode off one by one. Tucker was last. He shook my hand and gripped my shoulder hard. You've done enough wandering, boss, he said. Well, don't lose this one. I nodded. You ride careful, old friend. He tipped his hat to Deanna, spurred his horse, and was gone, swallowed by the horizon. For a while, we just stood there, listening to the quiet the trail had left behind. Then Deanna turned to me. What now? I took a breath, looked out over the valley, the rolling hills, the line of pines, the ribbon of water shining like silver in the morning light. There, I said, pointing toward a rise to the west. Land looks good for grazing, close to water. Maybe I'll put up a house. Maybe, I said, smiling, if the lady I married decides she'd stay a while. She looked at me, her eyes soft, the corners of her mouth lifting like the start of dawn. Then I suppose we'll need lumber. The days that followed felt different than anything I'd known. We rode the valley together, marking the land, finding where the soil held best, where the wind softened. I bartered the rest of my pay for timber, nails, and a team of mules. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. When the first wall went up, Deanna stood beside it, her hand resting on the frame. It doesn't look like much yet, she said. Neither does a seed, I said, but give it time. She nodded. Then let's plant it right. We worked side by side. She sanding the boards, me hammering, both of us learning the sound of creation. Nights were colder, but warmer in other ways. We'd sit by the small fire inside what would soon be a home, the wind pressing against the unfinished walls. She'd lean against me, her head fitting into the hollow beneath my chin, like it had always belonged there. One night, after a long day's work, she said, Rem, do you ever think about the first time you saw me? I do, I said, every time I close my eyes. What did you think? I took a moment before answering. I thought you were trouble, I said. She laughed softly. And now I think maybe trouble was the only thing worth finding. She smiled and looked around the cabin. You think this will hold? It'll hold, I said, long as we do. Winter came early that year. The snow moved down from the hills, quiet and relentless. We finished the roof just before the first storm hit. Inside, the fire crackled steady, and the air smelled of pine and smoke and coffee. Deanna stood by the window, watching flakes drift through the gray. It's beautiful, she said. It is, I said, but it'll test us. I'm not afraid of tests anymore, she said. Not if you're beside me. I looked at her then, really looked. The woman who'd run through glass and fear now stood steady in the light of her own choosing. I realized that somewhere between the dust and the snow, between the gunfire and the quiet, I'd stopped being her protector and started being her partner. We didn't talk much after that. Words would have only crowded the moment. That night, as the snow deepened and the world turned white, I lay awake listening to her breathing beside me, steady as the wind against the walls we'd built. I thought of the road behind us, the miles, the danger, the men we'd met and lost. And I thought of the road ahead, not marked by maps or herds, but by mornings like this one, where waking up meant more than surviving. I reached for her hand under the blanket, found it waiting. The storm outside grew stronger, but inside, everything was still. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to end. I felt like I'd arrived. Winter held the valley in its fist for months. Snow came and went, the way mercy does. Never when you expect it, always heavier than you think you can bear. The cattle we kept were few, just enough to see if the land would love us back. The river froze and thawed, froze again. Some days it was blue glass, some days a wound that refused to close. We worked through it. You don't think much on grand ideas when you're splitting logs and keeping a roof from leaking. You just keep going, breath to breath. I learned the sounds of the cabin, the way the timbers groaned when wind pressed too hard, the sigh the fire made when it caught new wood, and I learned hers too. The small laugh she let out when coffee boiled over, the hum she carried when she thought I wasn't listening. There's a kind of peace in that. Quiet work, shared warmth, the simple truth of being needed. For a man who's lived most his life moving, it felt like a prayer answered without words. But peace doesn't come without ghosts, not out here. One night, the moon was high and mean, throwing light across the snow so bright you could almost mistake it for day. I was sitting by the fire, cleaning my rifle, when Deanna said, "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "The road, the sound of the herd, the dust, the part of you that didn't stay still." I looked up. "Sometimes it's like missing a wound. It healed, but you still remember how it felt." She nodded slowly, pulling her shawl tighter. "I think I know that feeling. The part of me that keeps waiting for someone to come looking." I set the rifle aside. "He won't come, Deanna. Not anymore. Miller's the kind that don't ride twice into the same fire. And your father, well, men like him don't live long when they lose something they think they own." She stared into the flames, her voice barely there. "I don't know if I want him dead or just gone." "Gone's enough," I said. "Dead makes you carry him forever." She nodded, but I could see it still pressed on her, like a bruise that didn't know how to fade. Days passed slow after that. The snows deepened, then began to melt. Water trickled down from the ridge, whispering to the valley that spring was thinking about returning. I fixed the fence line, one post at a time. She planted herbs near the door. The land was learning us, and we were learning it. Then one afternoon, in early thaw, I saw dust on the southern trail. Not much, just a smear against the pale horizon, but enough to twist my gut. I took the rifle and stepped outside. Deanna followed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Riders?" she asked. "Two," I said. "Maybe three. Too far to tell." The air was still, carrying sound too well. I could hear the faint clatter of tack, the low murmur of voices. My mind went back to the ridge that night, to Miller's threat, This isn't finished. Deanna's face had gone pale, but her voice was steady. You think it's them? Don't know, I said. Could be traitors. Could be trouble. She went inside and came back with her Winchester, the one Tucker had taught her to use. Her hands didn't shake. When the riders came into view, I saw there were two, one in a long coat, the other younger, thin, hat pulled low. They didn't ride like bounty men, no hurry, no swagger. Still, I didn't lower my rifle. When they reached the yard, the older one raised a hand. You Quinn? I am. He nodded. Name's Donovan, sheriff out of Willow Springs. I remembered the man, steady eyes, kind face. Sheriff, you come a long way. He dismounted slow, careful not to spook the air. Didn't come to trouble you, Rem. Just thought you ought to know. There was a fire down south. Miller and Wythe Bank went up in smoke. Word is Miller was inside. I felt the world shift, like a horse turning underfoot. You sure? He nodded. Sure enough. And her father, Jed Calloway, he's gone too. Caught fever over the winter. Buried in his own yard, what was left of it. Deanna stood beside me, quiet as the snow. Her face didn't move at first. Then her shoulders loosened, slow, like a door unbolting. Thank you, Sheriff, she said softly. He looked at her, and for a moment I saw the understanding in his eyes. You folks seem settled here. I'll let the papers know you're not to be bothered. The past can stay where it belongs. He tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode off with the young deputy trailing behind. When the dust settled, Deanna sank onto the porch steps. She stared out over the valley, eyes lost in the distance. I sat beside her. It's done, I said. Is it? She whispered. It is. You're free now. She turned to me then, her voice trembling, not with fear, but something deeper. I don't even know what that means anymore. It means you get to choose, I said, every day. Not because someone tells you, because it's yours to do. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Then I choose this, the land, the quiet, you. We sat there until the light bled out of the sky. The air grew cold again, but it didn't bite the way it used to. Freedom has a different kind of chill. It settles in your bones, but it doesn't hurt. That night, she built a fire while I shut the door against the wind. We ate in silence, both too full of thought to fill the space with talk. When we finished, she took my hand across the table. You ever think we were meant to find each other? She asked. I think we were the only ones left standing when the storm passed, I said, and sometimes that's the same thing. She smiled at that. You still talk like every word's been somewhere before. Maybe it has, I said. Maybe it just took this long to find the right ears. Later, as the house settled and the night pressed close, I lay awake listening to her breathing beside me. The fire's glow painted her face in soft gold. Outside, the world was still, the snow quiet as sleep. And for the first time, I realized something that made my throat tighten. This wasn't the story of how I saved her. It was the story of how she'd saved me. Saved me from the road, from the ghosts, from the kind of loneliness that doesn't end when the sun comes up. Out there, I learned how to survive. Here, with her, I was learning how to live. Spring came to the valley slow, like it was unsure we deserved it. First came the soft drip of meltwater under the eaves. Then the smell of wet earth waking from sleep. The snow receded in patches, revealing the shape of what we built. A cabin sturdy enough to outlast memory. a corral, a small field ready for seed. Every morning, I'd walk down to the river. It still ran cold, sharp as glass, but the sound of it had changed. Where winter made it moan, spring made it sing. I'd stand there a while, boots in the thawing mud, and listen. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the current, older than I remembered, softer but steadier somehow, like the man looking back had finally made peace with the one who used to run. Deanna kept the cabin alive. She grew things that didn't seem to belong in such hard soil. Herbs, flowers, small green hopes that refused to die. Some mornings I'd wake before her and just watch her sleep, the light creeping in through the shutters to touch her hair. She'd stir, find my hand without looking, and whisper, "Morning, cowboy," like she'd been saying it her whole life. There was no ceremony to our days, no grand happiness, just small ones, quiet and real, the kind that last. She'd hum while she worked. I'd mend fences or break ground for a garden. We'd share coffee by the porch when the sun went down, the air still cool enough to bite. She liked the silence, so did I. It meant we both found a place where words could rest. Sometimes, though, when the wind came down from the north, it carried ghosts, the sound of hooves, the echo of gunfire, faces from the trail, Tucker's half grin, Cookie's curse, the endless horizon calling for me to ride. I'd feel the pull, like a song I used to know, and every time she'd find me standing outside looking south. She never asked what I saw. She'd just come stand beside me, close enough that her sleeve brushed mine. That small weight was enough to keep me there. One evening near dusk, we were sitting by the porch, watching the sky go from gold to indigo. She had a book open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. The last light caught her face just right, and I swear the whole world seemed to settle around her. "You thinking again?" she asked, smiling without looking up. "Always." "What about this time?" "About how the road used to own me," I said, "and how somehow I traded miles for moments." She closed the book, placed it beside her. "Do you miss it?" "Some days," I admitted. "There's a restlessness in a man that don't die easy. But I don't miss who I was when I was out there." "And who are you now?" I looked at her, at the soft lines the firelight drew along her cheek, and said, "A man learning to be still." She smiled then, the kind that starts small and takes its time. "You always sound like you're telling a story." "Maybe I am," I said. "No, only this one ain't over yet." That night, the wind rose again, soft through the pines. I couldn't sleep, so I got up, threw a log on the fire, and sat a while. The room was filled with that low crackle, the kind of sound that carries old thoughts. Deanna stirred but didn't wake. I thought back over the trail, how it started with dust and gunfire, how a frightened girl had burst out of a window and into my life, how every step since had been a kind of healing I didn't know I needed. I thought of Asa Kearney, of his dying words, "Don't let the bad ones teach you how to be." I'd carried that like a wound for years, and somewhere between the storm, the marriage, and this cabin, I realized what it really meant. It wasn't a warning against cruelty. It was a lesson in kindness, that even when the world burns, you can choose to be water. Deanna shifted in her sleep, murmuring my name. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The fire threw shadows against the walls we'd built, strong and imperfect, like us. Tomorrow would bring its own work, the fence, the horses, the 100 small things that make a life. And someday, maybe children's voices would fill this cabin, laughter ringing against the same boards we hammered by hand. I didn't know for sure, but for once, not knowing felt like grace. Outside, dawn started its slow crawl up the hills, pale and tender. The world was new again. I felt it in the bones, in the quiet pulse of the land, in the steady rhythm of her breathing beside me. I used to think freedom was the open road, the horizon calling a man's name, but I was wrong. Freedom is this: a hand that finds yours in the dark, a roof that keeps the rain off, a heart that beats beside your own and never asks for anything but truth. That's all there is to tell. The trail didn't end. It just changed shape, became smaller maybe, but deeper. And if you ever pass through the northern valley come spring, you might hear laughter riding the wind, smell wood smoke and bread, and see a man and a woman on a porch watching the sun go down. That'll be us. And you'll know, without asking, that we made it.